Hi everybody, I'd like to congratulate you for arriving at this final lesson and completing this course on how to give your child a classical Christian education at home. I'm Dennis Oliver Woods, headmaster at Kingsway Classical Academy, the world's first online classical Christian school for grades 7 through 12. Our topic in this final lesson is the missing ingredient in public education, and our objective will be to introduce the two key ingredients that John Dewey took away from the American high school student and how to get them back. On April Fool's Day of 2007, the Portland Oregonian newspaper reported results of an informal survey on what was missing from your public school education. Two of the top three responses were training, number one, in the ability to engage in critical thinking, and number two, the ability to communicate effectively. Little did respondents know that they were yearning for the dialectic and rhetoric components of the classical trivium, which John Dewey had purged from the system over 100 years before. The following editorial was submitted as an op-ed response but was never printed. It serves as a fitting summary to our exploration of the question, what is a classical Christian education? How can I give my child a classical Christian education at home? The essay was entitled, Here's What Public School Graduates Say Was Missing from Their Education, Portland, Oregonian, April 1, 2007. A review by Dennis Oliver Woods, headmaster at Kingsway Classical Academy. Susan Nielsen's fascinating analysis of what's missing from the high school curriculum concluded, quote, please teach students how to think, communicate, and run a household, end quote. The results of her informal research study appeared in the April 1, 2007 edition of the Portland Oregonian. Reader responses were a plaintive cry for the classical approach to education that existed in this country before John Dewey introduced his progressive model over a century ago. The words logic and rhetoric did not appear in the comments. However, readers were clearly describing these basic building blocks of the ancient classical trivium. We were treated to remarks like, quote, this class would be called maybe critical thinking. It would show how people make fallacious arguments to advance their points and manipulate the individual into a certain line of thinking, end quote. And, quote, the class would have them defend several viewpoints on controversial issues, end quote. The joke's on you, America. Ironically, the report appeared on April Fool's Day. Ironic because Americans have surely been fooled by John Dewey into substituting a pale imitation of education for the real McCoy. Progressive education remains the dominant model in the public schools to this very day. Under the older classical model, students were not only taught isolated subjects and technical skills, they were steeped in what Dorothy Sayers called the lost tools of learning. Mastering the tools of the trivium prepared them for a lifetime of learning. Beyond just learning to make a living, they were taught to live. Instead of asking, what can I do with this information, they asked, what can this information do with me? These were the tools that produced the intellectual giants of a bygone era. Virtually all of America's founding generation were educated classically. These were men and women who could think critically and communicate their thinking to others. In those days, it was called a liberal arts education, liberal as in liberty. What was this mysterious trivium? According to Miss Sayers' famous 1947 essay, The Lost Tools of Learning, the trivium consisted of three parts, grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric in that order. Bear in mind that Dorothy Sayers was the intellectual sparring partner of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien at Oxford before World War II. She was a scholar and an expert on the Middle Ages. Her essay may be read in its entirety at www.gbt.org/text/Sayers.html. She went on to explain that modern education concentrates on teaching subjects, leaving the method of thinking, arguing, and expressing one's conclusions to be picked up by the scholar as he goes along. By contrast, medieval education concentrated on first forging and learning to handle the tools of learning, using whatever subject came handy as a piece of material on which to doodle until the use of the tool became second nature. In practice, we can think of the trivium from two perspectives. As presented above, it is a tool for dissecting a particular subject. First, we master the grammar of the subject, its basic facts, definitions, and guiding principles. Second, we apply the tool of dialectic interaction or logic to interpret and understand the basic facts. This includes propaganda analysis as well as formal logic. Finally, we apply the interpreted facts and share them with others in written and spoken communication. This encompasses the skills of declamation and debate. The trivium also provides a paradigm for three stages of child development. Miss Sayers called these the Paul Parrot, the Pert, and the Poetic, the latter coinciding approximately with the onset of puberty. During the primary or Paul Parrot years, children love to memorize. They soak up grammar, languages, and other miscellaneous facts like a sponge. In middle school, the child has arrived at the perch stage of contradicting, answering back, questioning everything. The wise instructor will channel these natural tendencies into formal training in logic or dialectic. At last we reach the poetic stage, where self-expression comes naturally and may be groomed by the rhetorical arts. The pen is mightier than the sword. The story of how and why American education discarded the classical trivium is long and somewhat complex, but fascinating nonetheless. Curiously, it began in Europe with the devastating defeat of Germany at the hands of Napoleon at the Battle of Jena in 1806. Jena was a university town, and the intellectual counterattack from the nearby University of Jena proved to be overwhelming. Its effects are still being felt in American education halfway around the globe. According to John Taylor Gatto, New York Teacher of the Year in 1989, it was a professor of Kantian philosophy at Jena who shook the world with his famous address to the German nation. In this address, Johann Gottlieb Fichte called for a system of compulsory schooling in which everyone would learn to take orders. No more battlefield routes. The goal was obedient soldiers and citizens who thought alike about major issues. The method recommended by Fichte would divide larger ideas up into school subjects in short class periods punctuated by a horn. True learning, critical thinking, and motivation would thus be constantly interrupted and fragmented. Students would simply parrot back what they had been told in objective tests. Such students might sound educated, but their ability to think for themselves and communicate was severely retarded. It was this system that produced the German propaganda and war machines of the 20th century. All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Maria Remarque tells the story. That is why Dietrich Bonhoeffer once commented that the Second World War was the inevitable product of good schooling. The goal of the German or Prussian system was not to provide intellectual training, but to condition children to obedience and life in collective society. The system was transplanted to America by a cadre of young, impressionable idealists who traveled to Germany for doctoral studies in the first half of the 19th century. One of their number, Horace Mann, finally persuaded Massachusetts' notorious Know-Nothing legislature to adopt the system in 1852. Over the next 50 years, all 50 states followed the lead of the New Englanders. That was the remarkable result of the visionary John Dewey, operating from his educational laboratory school at the University of Chicago. Over the years, Dewey flooded the American school system with disciples of what he had renamed progressive education. When will we ever learn? And that brief history brings us full circle to today. What is the likelihood that the classical method will be returned to our public school system, you ask? The odds are approximately zero. As Dorothy Sayers noted over 60 years ago in her 1947 essay, it is the highest degree improbable that the reforms I propose will ever be carried into effect. Neither the parents, nor the training colleges, nor the examination boards, nor the Board of Governors, or the Ministries of Education will countenance them for a moment. For they amount to this, that if we are to produce a society of educated people fitted to preserve their intellectual freedom, we must turn back the wheel of progress some 400 or 500 years to the point at which education began to lose sight of its true objective, toward the end of the Middle Ages. Let's test your knowledge of what you just understood, or what you just heard, with traditional 5-question quiz. First of all, John Dewey was the father of classical education. True or false? Number 2, classical education emphasizes how to make a living. True or false? Number 3, grammar is called the Paul Parrot stage of learning. True or false? 4, public education is based on a behavioral model. True or false? And number 5, public education will eventually return to the classical model. Let's look at the answers. First of all, John Dewey was the father of classical education. Definitely false. Number 2, classical education emphasizes how to make a living. False. More an emphasis on how to live, with how to make a living following as a result. Number 3, grammar is called the Paul Parrot stage of learning. And that's true. Number 4, public education is based on a behavioral model. That's true. And number 5, public education will eventually return to classical education. And that's false. Well, if you'd like more information, let me send you back to our homepage at www.kingswayclassicalacademy.com. You can click on the program explanation link in the center of the page to learn more about our $1,000 diploma program. And when you're ready to get started, just simply click on the click here to enroll now and follow the prompts. My staff and I look forward to serving as your guides on this exciting adventure. Kingsway Academy exists to build a viable and affordable alternative to the public education system that we believe is destined to collapse. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to share with you this resource guide, and we look forward to serving you in any way we can in the future. And thank you again.